During his time in the ACT government, Mr Matthews has led whole of ACT public service initiatives, including the Human Services Blueprint, known as Better Services. And that's all about better utilising government investment in social outcomes and to meet future demand. It's a program that aims to deliver a cohesive human services system that is person-centred. Prior to working for government, Mr Matthews spent several years in the community sector at both local and national levels, and he has extensive knowledge of the range of issues encountered in family violence, and it's his remit to ensure that work is progressed while the government undertakes a rigorous recruitment process, and he'll be able to inform us about several recent government initiatives in the area of domestic violence. Everyone please welcome Mr Matthews to the stage.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for your warm welcome this evening. I also wanted to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on, the Ngunnawal people, and also say that when we speak about domestic and family violence, it's not only an important social issue of concern for many, but it is actually something that a number of people have experienced directly in their lives and have had some personal relationship with. So I'm always very conscious about the need to show sensitivity to that and to recognise it's not just an academic issue for everybody, it's something that is real in their lives. This is my first outing out as the Coordinator General for Family Safety, so I've duly prepared a 2-hour speech, which I will shrink down to 15 minutes. I've actually got a 90-second version as well, so I'm going to start with that and then take the remaining time to give a bit more of a grounded overview of the things that are happening in our community. So my 90-second version is as follows. Family violence is a widespread social problem that affects our entire society, and it doesn't discriminate on the basis of age, income level, educational levels, culture, and it's experienced in all cities, towns and rural communities across the nation. So it's not something that can be easily said, that's a problem over there. It is a problem everywhere. Despite this, there is evidence that the issue is actually not widely understood, either in terms of its causes or its effects, and also that our current responses are not adequate. I want to talk today about family violence more broadly than inter-partner violence, and I'll talk more about that. Family violence is also more than just about physical violence. It does include abusive, controlling and coercive behaviours. So when we think about this issue, we obviously are very concerned about violence and safety, but we need to understand the issue more broadly. Such behaviours which are not violent, in fact, can be the immediate risk factors prior to a serious physical injury or a family violence-related death. So behaviour and risk can escalate very quickly. Due to the nature of family violence, a whole of government, whole of community response is required. And this needs to include a very deep understanding about our attitudes to violence, our beliefs, our understanding of gender equality, and also, I guess, what we can do to support people to address these issues in their lives. We need to focus from prevention and early intervention. We need to have effective crisis responses, including measures to address immediate safety risks. But we also need to have a good legal framework and a functioning legal and community support system. So it really just shows the diversity of the issue and how we need to respond. But one of the messages is that everybody can play their part. There's my 90-second version. In terms of statistics around family violence, they are important to understand the dimension of the issue. 1/3 of Australian women have experienced violence by someone that is known to them. And 1 in 4 Australian women have experienced emotional abuse by a partner since the age of 15. And on average, 1 Australian woman is killed by their current or former partner per week. And in fact, we've seen an increase on that during 2015 and 16. So this is a very serious set of issues and a very extensive impact across our community. But statistics, of course, don't tell the experience of that violence. I've got some stories that women have told during some of our recent family violence reports, which I'll refer to during some of this discussion. This is one woman's story. It took me everything I had to pick up the phone and call for help that night after my ex-partner had told me over many years, go ahead, call the police, they won't help. Also, another woman, I don't think that the system has served me well. I seem to have come up a lot of brick walls in the very beginning and people that are not willing to help. And lastly, I was really scared to contact some of the agencies because of mandatory reporting. I thought they would confront him and make it work. Make it worse. I was constantly told that if I talked to anyone I would lose my children or that I wouldn't get to see them. So the experience of violence has all of these dimensions in the way that it affects people's lives. Most victims are women and children, and that is a factual basis, but men, of course, are also victims. And also, in fact, people can be both victims and perpetrators of violence, and that really, again, starts to draw out the complexity of this issue. It's very multifaceted, and it occurs in many different ways. In the ACT, during 2014-15, the police attended over 2,500 family violence incidents. That's in our community in a single year. The Director of Public Prosecution commenced 517 criminal proceedings in relation to domestic violence in that same year. And the Domestic Violence Crisis Service had over 17,000 calls in that same year. So again, just to reiterate the breadth and extent of the issue. Despite all of this talk around domestic violence and how it is manifesting across the community, there's evidence that the issue isn't widely understood and that our current responses aren't working. So throughout 2015 and 16, the government commissioned a number of reviews around family violence to look at the problem from different perspectives, and it showed that there was this lack of understanding, and also there were many areas of possible improvements. All of the reports that have been done have highlighted the importance of early identification and information sharing across each of those reports. The reports also found that where family violence does present in the system, it's actually in areas like schools, workplaces and in frontline health services, GPs for example, but often it's not correctly identified. So people will look at a presenting behaviour like an injury or a relationship problem, but not actually understand what's causing that injury or that behaviour. I talked about family violence being more than physical violence, so just a short definition. Family violence, of course, is broader than domestic violence. Domestic violence is often understood to be violence between intimate partners, a husband and a wife, or a same-sex relationship, or somebody in some form of direct relationship. Family violence includes relationship from adults to children, between siblings, and also between children and their parents. And that's often a cause of family violence, which is presents in different parts of the system where people are actually experiencing violence from their children. There is a current bill before the ACT Legislative Assembly to give broader effect to this definition of what family violence is, to properly capture the behaviours that are known to express how people experience violence. Experience family violence, including emotional and psychological and economic abuse. So it's really any form of controlling and coercive behaviours which restricts somebody's freedoms or affects their safety. And that is a definition that's being brought into the ACT law. We also want to give effect to a national domestic violence order system so that orders that happen in any one part of the country are recognised in other parts of the country. And also, it's actually, our new legislation is going to give the court the ability to make a protection order on their own initiative. So the traditional framework of protection orders has been somebody has to make an application for them, but people are often concerned about that or intimidated from making those protection order applications. The new laws will allow the court or the police to actually take those out on behalf of people. So in summary, family violence includes physical violence or abuse, sexual violence or abuse, emotional or psychological abuse, economic abuse, so controlling somebody's finances, for example, or using debt as a way of influencing somebody, threatening behaviour or any other coercive behaviours. When I talked about these non-violent behaviours, a number of the recent reviews have shown that in fact they were the immediate risk factors prior to deaths. And of course that death is the ultimate failure of a community and a system response around domestic and family violence. Of course there is lots of experience of violence that doesn't result in death. But we did a review of family violence deaths in the ACT, a case study review, where we went back and looked at the circumstances of 11 deaths. And what it often showed is that people were not engaged in the support system. They might have been accessing health and education services, but they were not accessing social services. And the so-called first responders, who include police and GPs, employers, for example, often didn't have the skills or the abilities to identify family violence and then to know what to do about it. So it really highlighted the importance of education and awareness raising as well. And these reviews did show that some people had not experienced any violence at all prior to the night on which they died at the hands of their partners. In terms of what we need to do about this, we do need to look at values and beliefs and attitudes, and I'd welcome discussion on that in our Q&A session later on. But we also need to have leadership from government and from the community as well, and we need to have a whole of community response. The government has committed to 37 separate actions in response to these recent family violence reviews. The themes that kept on coming up and over again were leadership and cultural change, prevention and early intervention, information sharing, collaboration and accountability for the efforts that we're currently employing. The government's response also included the appointment of the first full-time Coordinator General for Family Safety to lead change and to provide accountability across the service system, to implement an approach to collaborate services through a dedicated family safety hub, to modernise the legal framework and to provide an authorising environment for information sharing, so where people were concerned about safety risks, they understood what they could do about it and make sure that people could get support, and also to do education and training for the workforce, including these first responders, these frontline staff, so that people know what to do, they know what they're seeing and that they can respond appropriately. In the ACT budget, you would have noticed, hopefully, that a $21.4 million Safer Families package was announced over the next 4 years. That is to be funded in part by a household levy, which was an approach adopted by the government to raise these additional funds to coordinate this whole of government effort. So that's $30 for every household in the ACT in terms of a ratepayer. And whether you agree with that or not as an approach, what it does do is highlight the importance of the issue to the ACT government, but it also gives every ratepayer a stake in the solution and a right to contribute to the solution, and also seek some accountability about the funds that have been spent on their behalf. The sorts of things that have been funded under that package are very broad and diverse. Obviously, the role of the Coordinator General is a key part of that, and the establishment of the Family Safety Hub. But there's also been money put into frontline community services, additional funding for the Rape Crisis Service and the Domestic Violence Crisis Service, additional money for case management support to bring together the different kinds of supports that individuals need when they're experiencing family violence. To do a quite extensive community education program. So almost $800,000 has been allocated to train frontline workers and to educate the community about the signs of family violence and to skill and equip people to know what to do about it. There's some additional funding as well to support people that want to escape violence and need assistance to access private rental accommodation. There's a program called Room for Change which has been funded, which is a perpetrator-based program. So this is for men, in this instance, that are using violence, who acknowledged that they want to get some support around how they can address their own behaviours. So there'll be a 3-month residential program for those men, but part of this program is about ensuring that people can stay in their homes and remain safe. So the men will be supported so that they can address their violence, and women and children can remain in the home and be safe and also receive support. This is a leading edge Australian program that we're hoping to roll out in the ACT and see some successful results. There's also a number of investments in the justice system itself. So domestic violence is a crime, and I think that's one of our cultural attitudes which I think we need to understand. Violence is a crime, property damage is a crime, and it needs to be treated so by the community and by the courts. So there's additional funding to support the Directorate of Public Prosecution to bring charges, for the AFP to investigate and to respond, and also for legal aid assistance. And very importantly, and the last initiative I'll refer to, is a translating and interpreting service pool of funding for the courts and for specialist domestic violence services to allow people from cultural diversity and backgrounds to be able to access services in a language which is suitable for them. So in summary, we have an issue that affects the entire community. It does exist here in Canberra, as it does exist in every community in Australia. The community has stood up and said that it wants to do something about it and to respond appropriately. We're increasing our understanding of the issue, investing in our services, and really urging the whole of the community to stand up and play their part in safer families and a safer community. Thank you.
David Matthews, thank you so much for talking to us tonight, for explaining to us, I guess, the wide range of issues and problems that domestic violence can cover, and for giving us a bit of an idea of how the ACT government is coming up with inventive and proactive ways to stymie this problem.